This is your deep dive on assessment. I'm Catherine Gewertz. I'm a senior contributing writer for EdWeek. There's just one person back here. I messed up the chairs. I'm guilty. I did it on purpose because I didn't want to just hold forth to you, for you. I'm certainly here to answer any questions you have, to talk about what you want to talk about. But what I was hoping is today we could sit and chat, like I rolled up my sleeves. I took off my jacket. I wanted to just be comfortable. I want this to be for you. You can draw on me. More importantly, you can draw on each other. So I just want to start by just setting the stage a little bit, telling you who I am and the kinds of things I've been writing about. And that's, you know, why I'm in this room with you. I've been at EdWeek 18 years. I covered urban schools for 8 years. And then something called the Common Core came along, and I ended up being the full-time reporter on Common Core for 5 years. And that meant the last 2 years we're writing all about assessment, which I probably don't even need to tell you why that happened, because you know. So I was the assessment reporter for, it was pretty much all I wrote about for a couple of years. Then I morphed back onto my old beat of middle and high school and transitions to college and work. That's what I write about now. I still write a lot about testing on that beat because of what's happening with testing at the high school level. So some of the things I've been writing about, which is, I would love to discuss this with you and anything else that's on your mind. The shift from Park and Smarter Balanced and state mandated tests to the SAT and ACT. I don't know if any of you are seeing that in your states. The rise and fall of Park and Smarter Balanced, 44 states, now it's less than 20. States building their own tests, drawing off Park and Smarter Balanced, and mixing stuff with their own tests. Also, the backlash against testing and the downward pressure on states to reduce the amount of testing that they've got in their schools. And yet they face the fixed federal law piece of you gotta do 3 to 8 in math and ELA, and you gotta do you have all your state mandates. So what gets squeezed out? What we found is that this classroom and district level testing. So we can talk about that. We can talk about formative assessment, interim assessment. All that stuff is what I've been writing about. So what I want to know from you is, first of all, I just want to sense who's in the room. Who is at the state level in your job? State Department of Ed, overseeing state testing, anything like that? State? Anyone at state? District? District level. Anybody at the school site? Okay, good. The school site people, are you teachers? Are you assessment people, curriculum people? Just can you?
Principal.
Principal? Who else? Call it out. Principal?
Instructional coach.
Okay.
Instructional specialist and school test coordinator.
Okay. Of you school people, who's elementary level? Middle? High school?
6 through 12.
Okay, so we got a little sprinkling of everything. All right, awesome. Let me just throw it to you to see, what do you want to talk about? Because I could just start asking questions. Or I tried to sort of give you a landscape of what I've been writing about, but if none of that interests you, let me know what does. Pick up on something and let me know what you want to talk about.
The squeeze that you talked about with what's getting squeezed out. I'd be interested to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, really, I told you pretty much what we found, which is that in audits, right, and of course, there's federal grants to support this too, right? Federal money available to support district level audits. And the audits are, I mean, you can audit all you want, but you still have to do your state testing according to federal law. So to me, it's sort of a matter of physics, like what goes. I mean, so I'll ask you guys, I mean, at the district level, have you been trying to pare back? Have you cut back on testing? And can you talk about what you're doing? You're saying,
Well, we had a district plan, and part of it was there was an assessment audit. And in my role as a coach, I went through all of the assessments that we do at the school level, and in an effort to kind of evaluate what our students are going through and better tailor, you know, the day-to-day requirements on them and the assessment requirements. We haven't had a whole lot come out of it, but we are in the process of evaluating what's happening.
what do you think are the likeliest targets if something has to go?
Well, we have had an increased focus on common assessments and perhaps paring down the common assessments so they aren't these behemoths, that they're targeted to specific skills. So I think we're going to see a shift to what exactly does an assessment look like, whether it's summative or formative, what is it informing, is it informing practice or student achievement, and hopefully scaling back that kind of onus that's on our kids.
Is anybody else working on stuff like this?
Well, I'm not working on that, but I'm interested to hear, because in our district, I'm from Connecticut, and we still do have these hard balances. We're one of the states that do. So we are trying to scale back on assessments, but at the same time, teachers and parents struggle with not having summative assessments to be able to show parents and show growth and progress. So moving from all summative to, we have a lot of formative, but a lot of it's anecdotal. I mean, we're doing a lot of conferring. Our math curriculum is a lot about collaboration and dialogue. It's not the skill and drill. I mean, there's still the skill practice, but there's a lot of periods of time where there's 3 works and those skill sheets, those worksheets aren't going home anymore. So those 10 words to study from Monday to Friday aren't going home anymore. So the parents come into the conferences and it's a progress report, not a report card. It's not A, B, C, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, so trying to help them understand, because it looks very different than what they had, what I had, knowing that it's a growth model, it's a real struggle with that. So that balance to not over-assess, but be able to show how children are progressing in a meaningful way. The parents understand, well, what does that mean for them when they get to high school and college? Who's going to look at those? Where are they in relation to their peers? Are they really A students? Is that what a 4 is, Mrs. Ruddick? So really, and the teachers struggle with that too, because they want to be able to sit there and say, this is why I gave them a 3 or a 4. The gray, the anecdotal, and the soft is really hard. So we're kind of in that middle right now.
You were doing a lot of nodding when she was talking about what's going
Am I
on where you
talking
are.
new language?
I have the same issue where I have a lot of parents asking for something that's more tangible, something that's familiar to them. What did they have when they were in school? That's how they're looking at the situation. They don't have the background to understand some of the anecdotal information we're providing.
Right.
So I do, you know.
And I do think too that many parents feel that what was good for them is good for their children. And we're a fairly successful suburban, a little bit rural community, so it doesn't have some of the struggles that urban has. There is some affluence, and they said, look how well we're doing. But trying to educate them about what a global environment looks like now, and what's out there for kids was not what was representative that we had. We don't know what kind of jobs we're preparing our kids for. We don't know where 20 years ago we'd be here. So, you know, trying to teach them those soft skills and the problem solving and the communication. They don't look at that as education, not all of them, of course, but many vocal people at board meetings and things like that, or they'll be in my office, can you help me explain? It's tough, it's hard.
I'm with Norfolk, an urban community, and I see a lot of test anxiety, a lot of meshing of criterion-based state tests with standard-based assessments. And in between those, you have district assessments, you have district benchmark assessments, and lo and behold, 2 weeks later, in addition to giving the STAR assessment, we're doing district bench assessment mock tests. And, you know, it's like we had to make a decision for the alternative school. The window for testing was from all of March to the end of April. Well, with SOL testing taking place really, well, May through June, we said, you know, we gotta stop it. We gotta cut it off on March 30th and give the teachers the opportunity in the month of April to not have any testing and to be able to remediate and to help kids, you know, come to an understanding with the standards that are coming up, because for our high schoolers, that's determining whether they're going to graduate or not.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in Virginia, she's talking about the standards of learning, SOL. Virginia is a state that actually did cut back on state testing, and yet the tests still take up so much time and space that you're having to rearrange yourself to cut teachers some breathing room.
Yeah, we give them in October to term grad, we give them in January, then we have the March writing, and then you have the non-writing. And that with the standardized assessments and the district, it's just too much.
Yeah, you're not feeling any breathing room from the state testing reductions?
No, the only thing I see reduction is in grades 6 and 7 with the alternative assessment portfolio, for which the state nor the district has formed a specific criteria rubric. So the teachers are all floating out there in different directions. Had to sit down with the teachers and plan something, because plan backwards, know right from the start what it is you're going to evaluate the students.
Yeah, I'm in Chesapeake County Public Schools, former school psychologist, now social learning specialist. And one of the things that when I work with teachers about understanding data literacy, first of all, I think we use data, but we don't necessarily take time, the right amount of time to teach people what data do you have, what can you do with it, and what can you not do with it. But bottom line, when it comes down to being a parent, which I am, I want to know where my kid is, where are they going, and then how do they know when they get there? Because as a parent, when my kids come home and we look at, even when my kid comes home and says, I got 100 on a test, fantastic. How'd you do that? How did you get there? And if they can't tell me, the strategies that they use to get 100, well, what's the point? How can you replicate that? Or, when you have a common assessment, I love the fact that we have common assessments, but they'll come home and they say, well, I got an 85. Fantastic, what'd you get wrong? I don't know, I never saw the test. Can the teacher see the test? I don't know. Are you gonna go over any errors
or benchmarks you're talking about?
Yeah, computerized benchmarks. So we have those assessments, but again, when we talk about, especially, talk about feedback, talk about learning from your mistakes, if you don't even know what mistakes you got, what's the point of the data?
Do you have any sense of whether the teachers are getting that feedback? Because clearly the kids aren't, right?
The kids aren't, but I don't know from a principal perspective, I don't know if on some of those.
But is your
benchmarks,
principal?
One of my principals.
Okay.
Yeah, so so probably the things that we are talking about there are, kind of a district level kind of benchmarks. So like, for instance, in math, we do one kind of like in the discovery time and then kind of kind of time. And it is, you just kind of put it, it's online, so everything kind of happens behind the scenes and they see a pass or fail. You can't really send that home because you're doing year after year, so you're not sending that home with parents and things like that. So really it is up to the teacher to then unpack it with the students, we call it, and so we're doing that. But we've been working a lot on, we call it like student-led assessments. Yes. We're really asking the students to evaluate, how do you think you did on this? What is your input on this? If you were to have a 1 through 4, 4 you should be able to teach someone else, right, basically. Exactly. Why do you think that? And you kind of have some of that, we've struggled with that too, that quantitative piece to that, not just this feels like a 4, and that 4 isn't necessarily an A, because if you're only teaching to the benchmark, you can't get a 4 because 4 is above and beyond the benchmark. And so it's just a total mind shift for everyone involved, but trying to kind of add those open-ended things with how did you get your answer, why did you do it that way, has been just, kind of the blend and the balance, because you're going to have those things, and you still do have tests. You've got to have them ready and okay to be able to trudge through a test, but still have some of those other pieces that are so important.
I missed this. Are you guys in Virginia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you doing
just
this
for
student-led work under an assessment for learning grant?
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we actually
Through the
wrote, if y'all want to
Virginia
look this up, we wrote a story about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really
It's a
interesting work,
with-
yeah.
It is, and there's quite a few different, I forget how many,
School district, it keeps
School
adding.
district.
Yeah, it's a
But it's
program that more districts
phenomenal.
are doing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you had your hand up, I thought.
Yeah, so at the secondary level in Virginia, that's my area, I'm a CTE supervisor K through 12. So we had the added complication, if you want to call it that, last year of any student on a standard diploma then had to have a CTE credential. So last year, every school division that I've ever worked with and people that I meet with, we were scrambling basically from April up through June, probably to the day of graduation, trying to get the kids who hadn't had a CTE passing credential to pass a credential. And, or if a student's diploma status changed, then we had to try to figure out how to get them quickly on board with taking a CTE certification for graduation. So we started that process a lot earlier this year. We kind of identified those kids last year. And it's been an ongoing process each and every year. What I can say about CTE credentialing that's different than just with a lot of what you all have to deal with is working with the business community and the employers in my area. Industry certifications are a good thing. These are positive things that can help students to get employment. And so we view them differently. It is an assessment, but it's a lot of skill-based type of assessing that can then help a student to be gainfully employed. So we have, I'm about 30 miles south of here, we have Lockheed Martin, we have Micron, all of them in our backyard, and they're looking for these industry certifications for the students that can lead to apprenticeships and internships for them, and then these companies are helping to pay for the kids through college. So that's the good thing in my world.
I wanted to respond to Chesterfield with student awareness of their performance on DBAs. Norfolk has been working with Focus Schools based out of California, and we're all on the same page in PLCs, Smarty Goals, and all those things. One of the things they are requiring is that every teacher have a data wall and every school have a data room. Well, there's FERPA, which is something I brought up. So the way we've gone about it is every student has a number, like 0, 1, 2, and that number would be their number in every class they have. And so their number is there, and they're not in ABC order, and then their score. And then the IT person has been assistant teachers in getting a data analysis, and then looking at the data and where the class has missed 80% or more of a certain standard, to put the timer on for 15 minutes and just start going over those items. And then once the 15 minutes is up, just mark off where you left off and then go on with what you intended for the day. So they do get feedback on how they performed, and they get feedback on why something wasn't what it was, or you know, you look at a data analysis, you can see all the kids answered B when the answer was D. Why? You know, well, I found out when I did my doctorate that the district benchmark tests were not field tested. So that should tell you right there, you know, the validity and reliability of the tests these kids are taking. At least they just get a participation grade and not what they earned on it. So.
And we've been talking a lot about interim, benchmark, those kinds of assessments. I mean, is that what's on your mind? You guys want to talk about some of it? I mean, I know in our work and when we write about reports and surveys, those are the ones no one likes or finds any value in. Yet, you know, there are lots of dilemmas built into your work because of some of it, which is to say state mandated tests, right? Do you want to talk about anything about that, or you want to keep on with this formative, interim, benchmark? What's on your mind? You got a room full of colleagues who can help you if you've got questions. So who's struggling and wants to know what other people are doing?
I guess I continue to want to see how the students are generalizing a skill. So, you know, teaching a skill and then analyzing it with, you know, summative data. I want to know if we're teaching for the test, are they able to generalize that skill?
So like a performance-based assessment.
And how do you know if they generalize it? You know, you try to balance not too many assessments, but we do have to have some kind of accountability. We're not just teaching and learning without seeing that transfer into the regular work and then to the next grade. So there's a lot of dialogue going on in our district about
So
that.
what form would that take? I mean, is anyone kind of working on that question where you are? I assume you're talking about performance tasks,
Yeah,
right?
and project-based learning and, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
I taught math in Petersburg a few years back at a year-round school, the middle school there. They had a struggling math department, and one of the things with the year-round school was to implement intersessions. So there was a 1-week period, and we looked at the district benchmarks that the students had. The teams got together and analyzed the errors that the students may have made. We went over the errors with the students in the classroom setting, but when we got to that intersession period, we had identified the questions and aligned them with the standards, retaught, and then provided a project-based learning opportunity for the students. So everything was connected. We looked for that deeper understanding, clarifying any errors that the students were making. I think one of the benefits of Virginia is also too, that with the standards of learning, the state has broken down areas where there are common errors on assessments. So for each grade level, each standard-based assessment that students take, they look for those areas of weakness and common errors that are made across assessments for all students.
Well,
I was just going to say, I think that's a critical piece, that you're coming back and you're looking at those. I think not only looking at the errors, but where with the teaching piece of it. the instructional piece, why are those errors, if it's longitudinal or if you're looking at cohorts, is it in the teaching, not just the learning? You know, why do those errors keep coming up? What are we missing? Is it developmentally appropriate? Are those the assessment items that should be there? Or do our teachers know how to instruct it? It's not just the student results, in my opinion.
I'm curious, is that a system you guys designed, or are there pieces that you purchased? What was that system made of?
Well,
The teaching pieces, the testing pieces, was it a program that you bought? Did you
oh yeah, no, it's a
design it
district,
yourself?
yeah, the district
District
develops the
designed it,
assessment,
okay.
you know, based on the standards of learning
Okay.
that are expected for the state. But one of the things that we did notice in working as teams, departmental teams, was that maybe my students had mastered 7.12, but no one else had that success. So we would say, well, what did you do? How did you teach this?
So the instructional piece.
Right, and then we would come back together and,
That's great.
determine what products and processes we would look at for getting that mastery for everyone.
I work with a company called Avant Assessment, and they work in foreign language. And for any of you who are interested in this model of proficiency-based assessment, that they're probably the top company in education, because in foreign language, no one pays attention to foreign language. It's almost like PE, because it's not on the state test. But the result is the field has moved heavily to proficiency-based assessment, which means what can you do with the language instead of what can you conjugate. And the national standard, as promulgated by the association in the field, ACTFL, emphasizes that. So actually, there's this odd situation right now in assessment where the leader in the application of assessment is this field nobody pays attention to, but every school has it. Every school district has it, at least. Elementary schools, I know, don't all teach foreign language. But every district has foreign language, and you can look at this as an example that can then transfer. And the state of Kentucky is probably a leader in that. Yep. They've started out in foreign language with proficiency assessment. Now they've applied it to everything. And they're starting to get this kind of application data back both from industry and from the assessment, and they're using that for program improvement.
Is the assessment like a rubric kind of assessment? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's an online assessment. It's dynamic, which means
Like
every
adapted?
student, it's adaptive, so every
Adaptive.
student actually encounters a different assessment. But the point of it is that it presents what they call reality, elements of the real world, train schedules, conversations, and you have to interact with those. So it's actually measuring to standard what students can do in terms of proficiency. And what excites me about it is the application to other fields, which Avant doesn't do, but as I said, which Kentucky is doing, and I think others could, because it takes it to the point you're describing, where local industry can get involved and start to play.
Sorry, we've got just a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure that, others of you who have assessment issues on your minds get to ask your colleagues questions or get to throw a question out that you want to hear about. What's bothering you?
You mentioned ACT being focused at the high school level. And in our state,
And
in
SAT.
Alabama, that is our high school assessment and achievement measure. So we've identified that. And we had ACT Aspire at grades 3 through 8 for 2 years, and our state board decided they wanted to toss that out because the readiness data is very hard to interpret for parents. They wanted to call it proficiency data. It was not proficiency data. It was readiness. So the big question now for us is, how do you intertwine the skills, the process skills that are the focus area of ACT at the high school level with your content standard focus at the elementary and middle school level? Because there are gaps there. And I know a lot of states try to blend those. Our state hasn't done that yet. So I was just curious as to how that work looks in other states.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to know. I mean, I've actually written a number of stories on this issue about how there are alignment problems, and as states, y'all are gonna have to take these assessments to federal peer review, right? And SAT has not had its turn to go through peer review yet, because it's the new SAT, right? So, and one of the things that every state's gonna have to show to get permission to use this thing, like any test, is the degree of alignment to standards. And there's a dearth of alignment, independent alignment studies. The College Board has a lot of them, ACT has them, but independent ones, there's a real thinness there showing alignment. So there's sort of this question floating around. I keep writing about this. I don't know how much of it's taking hold and resonating, but I mean, it really is not an established, and every state has its own alignment study, and a lot of people don't appear to be doing it. So to me, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's a real concern for kids.
One thing that Virginia does, I served on 2 VDOE SOL committees for writing, and we have field test items built in there. And we have teachers, like 8 of us from around the state, and we look at the data from the field tests and decide which ones to keep and which ones to toss. We also dialogue, because in the colleges, the universities are teaching different rules with English. Like in a series, you don't have to use a comma before and. But the SOL test requires a comma before and. So we need to have that common dialogue, and we need to teach the specific rules, even if there are variations that as adults we learn about, so the kids can be successful. When the adults aren't on the same page, it's difficult. I used to have to do at department meetings an English lesson. A teacher, Mrs. Roberts, didn't know she had to put apostrophe S after her name because she's one person. She can't help it, it ends with the S. You know, so there was like all this confusion about reading and writing.
Well, I'll tell you that at Ed Week, we always argue about the Oxford comma. The argument has never ended.
Right, but you have to go with what's being assessed. And if you're not teaching the kids that, then they're confused.
It's true. I have to tell you, my time with you is over. I'm getting the hook. As my friend back there says, that's it. Thank you so much. I wish I had an hour.
Thank you.